Hi everyone, my name is Sandhya and today I have the privilege to interview Shriyam sir. The purpose of this interview is to ask sir questions and discuss topics that are frequently asked by the millennial generation. So who are we, millennials? I would say between teenagers to our early 30s, we're a generation that's been called the masters at the art of multitasking. We like to question the norms, think outside the box, and we're very creative when it comes to problem solving. We're also a generation that strives for transparency and we're very socially conscious. Most of us have either spent some portion of our life or the majority of our childhood growing up with the internet. And because of that, we're also a generation that's obsessed with instant gratification. We turn to the internet and sometimes social media to solve all of our problems. And in some ways, like Sir says many times, Google has become our God. But spirituality isn't something that you can just Google. It's something that requires detachment from technology, time alone, patience, and like a fine wine, it takes a considerable amount of time before you can enjoy the fruits of your labor. All things that our generation struggles with. And though you don't see the fruits of your labor till much later, everyone who has been on this path says that it's worth it. Right? So many questions arise for us that we're currently struggling with, like, for example, how do I find everlasting happiness? What is the purpose of life? And during my own quest, I found that the answers to many of these questions are in our ancient teachings. Vedanta, religion, and just generally spirituality. And not only that, I think there are many important lessons that we can learn from these ancient texts. And even though they were written thousands of years ago, they're still applicable to us today. And the challenge with this, though, is that these teachings are not something that you can easily Google. So amongst this abstractness, which is Vedanta, which is maybe sometimes not easy to understand and digest for our generation, we're looking for a way to relate these situations to what's going on in 2018 and how we're living our lives in 2018, a time where we're all seeking instant gratification. So that's why I'm really excited to interview Sir, since you have extensive experience and practical knowledge of these teachings, so you can help us decipher them and help us apply them in our lives.
Yeah.
We're hoping that you can be our guide, our guru, to help us bridge the gap between the ancient knowledge, texts, and teachings of the past to modern day life, especially as it relates to young people. In addition, you are a living example of someone who has been on a spiritual path in parallel to living successfully in the material world. From a young age of 19, you've also succeeded in multiple careers across multiple industries. You've been married, you have children, and all the while you've been able to balance all of these things and grow yourself spiritually. And since you've experienced all of these things firsthand, we would really love your advice on how we can all live in this world and be able to grow spiritually the way you have, hopefully.
Okay. So, do you have questions?
Yes.
Yes.
So, to begin, some of the topics that I wanted to discuss today is spirituality generally, how good and bad karma works, and the benefits of practicing yoga, meditation, and chanting, how this can apply to the younger generation. So to first start off with, I'd like to talk about questioning and losing faith. I think many young people watching this interview have grown up and they've had some sort of religious upbringing, whether it's hearing stories from the Ramayana, Mahabharata, participating in religious cultural activities, reading the Quran, going to the temple. They all have some understanding about our ancient scriptures. However, when we grow up, we start to face certain challenges that cause us to question or even lose our faith. For example, we experience love and breakups, family members have cancer, you work really hard in your career but you fail an exam or you can't find a job. Maybe it's not just one thing, but a series of these things that build up and you start to question your faith. And the more you try to pray, sometimes things seem to kind of fall off the ladder even more. So my first question is it okay when we are young to question our faith, tradition, our ancient texts? Is it normal to lose faith? Have you ever experienced this? And how can we hold on to faith?
Right. So, two things, faith and questioning faith. You talked about the Mahabharata and the Ramayana and so on. Okay. On the other hand, you also said, somewhere you mentioned Quran. Mm-hmm. Now, in my case, the whole inquiry into this, if there was something deeper than what you read or hear, started with loss of faith. So I'm not afraid when young people say I've lost faith, because I think it's a good beginning, because what they mean by having lost faith is that they don't want to believe something simply because somebody has said it, or even if it is in your own scriptures. See, practically that's what it is. Even in the scriptures, it's what somebody has said. You don't know. So, this generation, which thinks more than the earlier generation, I think after every gap, new children who come, they are more intelligent than we were at that age, because of various factors. It could be genetic, it could be health issues, it could be the way life is now, and also, of course, internet, which is like, instead of the supreme being, as the Upanishads say, all pervading, internet is all pervading.
Very true.
Google idam sarvam is a good way to say, instead of Ishavasya idam sarvam. So they ask questions. I think any discovery in material science as well as the higher sciences has come through questioning. So when somebody questions, not as if they have lost faith, it's that they're not sure, what is this? You say so, but how can we believe it? Mm-hmm. We don't know, we need to look. That, I think, is not negative, but is a positive aspect of life. So there's nothing to be, the why we are worried is because we don't have the answers to give them, because we don't know ourselves. Mm-hmm. So the first step is to first find out for oneself. Mm-hmm. Then you can deal with these questions. It's when you can't deal with these questions that you get upset. I have seen people go to a spiritual teacher and ask some questions. When the answers that he or she knows, they're okay with that. But when they ask questions which they can't deal with, they get irritated, or they say, oh, this is a silly question, or move. You see, because they don't know what to say. So I think the first thing for a teacher should be to say, I don't know. Not I know everything. Unfortunately, in our ancient culture, it's not part of the culture, but as it is projected now, I'm talking about Indian culture, there is some kind of a belief that a spiritually advanced person is omniscient. Nobody is omniscient. Nobody. You may know little more than others, but and in fact somebody may know more than you in some other matters. So nobody's own. So why can't we start saying, well, I don't know, this question you have asked, it has occurred to me for the first time. Can I look into this? So now to look into this involves first that I study the question. Mm-hmm. I'm not meaning anything specific. Generally, I understand the question. If I have already understood it, it becomes a little easier. But if I don't, I need to have time. I can't instantly say, okay, this is the answer, or shut up. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you need to understand. So the thing, unfortunately, people expect immediate answers. And those who want to be popular want to give immediate answers. They may not be the right answers. Mm. Why should we know everything? So I say we should look at this carefully. Say, give me time, I don't know. Now if you say you don't know, you lose faith. Others lose faith in you. That's okay. I don't know, so let me study it. Then, after the study, then there should be a dialogue. Without dialogue, you cannot come to an answer. Because if I say something, it's my understanding, my opinion, you don't know. So if you have a dialogue, then slowly you begin to understand what I'm trying to say. So I think loss of faith is not to be feared. It needs to be faced. And for facing it, you should know how to handle it. You should have some experience in this matter, and you should go with the idea that, well, I also need to learn. Suppose you know the answers, suppose, to most of the questions asked. Even then, the approach is not to give ready-made answers, because that has no meaning, but to get the person to think and find out for themselves. I think if the young people are given this idea, they would very much respond to it, instead of trying to fill their heads with stuff and say, this is what you should believe. Why would they believe it?
Yes, I completely.
If you have time, I can go a little more into this.
Yes.
2 stories. No, with stories you learn more. But these are not stories, these are real stories. A young man goes to Tiruvannamalai when Ramana Maharshi is around. Okay? And he has not eaten for 5 days. He is supposed to be a serious seeker. He has not eaten for 5 days. And he has taken the vow of silence. He is a seeker, but he has already taken the vow of silence. How can he seek? Anyway, so he has taken the vow of silence. And he goes to Ramana Ashram and he stays there for 6 days. And at the end of it, Maharshi also hardly spoke. So he writes a note and sends it to Maharshi. I have been here for 6 days. I am hungry. What kind of an ashram is this? Nobody asks me if you are hungry. He's in Mauna, okay? He doesn't open his mouth. This guy. Okay. How is somebody supposed to know? Just tell me. So anyway, nobody looks at a hungry man. And I see you sitting and feeding the monkeys and the squirrels. What about me? I am hungry. And I am a seeker. I have come here. Now, here is a genuine teacher. Maharshi responds. He breaks his silence and he responds. He said, I am very sorry. How do I know that you are hungry? I am not omniscient. And he says, I don't have cameras which can detect if somebody comes here. I don't know. And as far as the ashram is concerned, if you had opened your mouth and asked for food, you would have got food. How do they know that you are hungry? You don't know. So I don't know. What I am trying to say is, Maharshi was so transparent that he said, I didn't know that you were hungry. Somebody else would have pretended, oh, I knew, but I was testing you. See the difference?
Yeah.
You get what I am trying to say? Okay, that's one part of the story. The same thing which you asked happened many years ago when I came to the United States, probably my first visit, 98 or 99. I was taken to the Hindu temple, I think, because I was living in Fremont with somebody. In some place there was a Hindu temple where I was taken. Oh, no, sorry. This was in Phoenix. So I was staying with a Gujarati, with a Patel, who had a house which had, I think, 16 bedrooms or something. One of them was given to me. And it happened to be Ras Leela time. So the Gujaratis are very particular about this Ras Leela. So lots of youngsters had gathered, very nicely dressed and, with skirts that when they turned flew like a umbrella. And so the parents told me, some of them, that these youngsters, they come for Ras Leela and all that is fine, but they don't understand anything about our culture. Some holy men come from Gujarat and they don't touch their feet, they refuse to go to them, so can you talk to them? I said, listen, and I was like this, I was wearing a pair of jeans and a shirt. It was pretty warm weather. So I said, okay, I'll do that. Are they willing? I said, we will try. I said, okay. So I was led into a room, it's like a drawing room which they had made into like a conference, huge. And there were some chairs And I was given, first they asked me if I wanted a throne. I said, sorry, give me a single chair. So I sat down, because they apparently had some thrones for the gurus. So I said, no, I'll sit in a chair. So I sat down, and there were all these chairs, and all these kids, boys and girls, teenagers a little more, came and sat down there. So I was given a microphone. So I said, okay, now I'm going to talk to these youngsters. So the parents are also there. I said, for 15, 20 minutes, can you get out of here? I want to talk to them. You said talk to the youngsters. They are here, I'll talk to them. I don't want you. Can you please do that? The youngsters, 3 or 4 of them stood up and said, yes, please, go out. So they were out. So I spoke to them, and I found out that they were actually good children. There were 1 or 2 were a little bit into drugs and all that, but most of them were quite okay. Their question was, we don't know who these guys are, and they come wearing weird garments, and they're sitting on thrones, and they're not kings. We live in a democracy. Why should we go and crawl before them and touch their feet? I said, but you're here listening to me. But he said, but sir, you're cool, you're like us. So we had a beautiful dialogue. I'm telling you, it went from half an hour. I think the parents were wondering what's going on, because they came and knocked. I said, now you can come in. Yeah. We had a lovely dialogue. I said, look, don't reject anything offhand. Look carefully. There may be some reasons why your parents are asking. If you don't like them, reject them, but don't reject them offhand without looking into it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they're trying to touch a monk's feet. See, look at the tradition. Perhaps that was the fashion then. It needn't be imitated now. You don't need to. There are people who touch somebody's feet, and in their mind they're thinking, when is this guy disappearing? But you don't have to do that. It's hypocrisy. So be transparent. If you don't want to touch somebody's feet, that's absolutely fine. But don't pretend. You know. So then they said that, can we again have another session tomorrow? They said, so I said, okay. So we had another session, and I explained to them about, they were so put off by this, they were kind of literally rejecting everything that is in tradition. I tried to make them understand that you can't throw everything off simply because it is tradition. It's a label, just as you say non-tradition is a label, tradition is a label. Something is tradition, you don't have to reject it simply because it is tradition. It's like throwing the baby out with the bath water. So I think this is the way to approach it, and I think there is a solution, because then young people like to think and find out for themselves. And if you know what you're saying, then you can provide the guidelines for this. But even if you know something, start with the understanding, start with the feeling that I really don't know, let's work it out together. You know, then it becomes their problem, not mine. And they find solutions. I think that is very important.
Okay.
Yeah, we've been going on talking now. You should say something.
No, I think that's,
sorry.
I think that's great. But let's say, for example, young people, they don't have access to somebody like you. Maybe their parents are a little bit dogmatic. They're feeling frustrated. Maybe they are kids who do just throw anything out the window that has that label of being religious.
Yeah. I've seen that, yes. So what do we do?
So what do we do? How do we move forward?
You have the internet, you have an interview.
That's why we're here.
So wait a minute. So now what I want to say is, you must be saying this to me, but I'm saying this to you. Maybe you think the same. While internet and Google have their limitations in these matters, they are also useful tools.
Yes, definitely. I agree.
Yeah, so therefore, the young people should be exposed to positive aspects of the internet. So they're not all the time spending time looking at just entertainment or things like that. And for that they should understand that it is important to do that. Yeah. That the happiness which they are searching for Well, that's fine. It may be found somewhere, but it can also be found in different directions. That they can turn around and look within and perhaps find what they're looking for outside. Now, this idea has to be sent to them.
Yes.
I mean, broadcast to them.
Definitely. And I think if they're watching this or they somehow find this video or they've already taken that first step. And I think to kind of help them to continue on this path, I think a few of the questions in the interview, so it's almost like an online class where we can give them homework.
They can either come back to you or come back to me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But then there is a link established and then it carries on.
Yes. I think that support system.
I think that's the point where you want to have this interview.
Yeah.
Good. It's a very wonderful thought.
Thank you. So moving on to the next topic, I wanted to discuss the idea of karma and just further discuss this idea of facing life's challenges, right? Because when you start questioning your faith, it's generally a time when you're facing some sort of life challenge.
Right.
And I think that's something that our generation really struggles with. So millennials have some of the highest rates of suicide in the world.
Right.
And millennials, the younger generation. So causes of this kind of stress and anxiety and depression includes pressures from college, exams, bullying, tensions with family, pressures for your career, stability, getting married. In order to help us better handle this stress, I think it's important to understand two things. One is, why are these challenges or negative things happening to me or my friend or my family member? And what are the tools and techniques we can utilize to help us to overcome these challenges? And to to kind of give a little bit more context for the first question, why are these challenges happening to us? I wanted to discuss karma with you. And from my understanding, karma means an action or a deed, and it refers to kind of this spiritual principle of cause and effect, where these actions affect an individual's influence of their future. It almost reminds me of Newton's third law, where in every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, every action need not have an opposite reaction, but there are
there's a consequence.
There is a consequence. I mean, this is even common sense.
Right.
If you do something, it definitely has its consequences, good or bad.
Right.
Okay. Now, the thing is, the crux of the theory of karma is, as you sow, so you reap. This is the middle point. This is the crux of this whole thing. So what happens? Just think about this. Even if you explain karma of somebody's life, let's say past births and so on, you cannot go back and tinker anything there. It's over. You have no control over what has happened, right? You can't go back there and tinker what happened. Okay. And if you want to do good things or be happy in the future, you can't go there and tinker. You don't know where the future is. Okay. So what do we have with us now? Present. So instead of getting caught up in how, why of these things, can we work on the present? Actually, that is the crux of the theory of karma. What you do now is what you're going to reap tomorrow. So, with all the limitations that we have, maybe based on our past karmas, if you believe in past lives, or it may be because even biologically we are the result of a million years of genetic evolution. So many things have come to us. Even if you leave the other theory out, we are not what we think we are. We are much more than that. We are a combination of so many influences, traits, experiences, because it's a 1 million years of evolution we are sitting here now. So we need to see in future if I need to go on the proper track. And in this life now as it is, I need to keep myself happy. One thing is I can ignore what happened because I don't know really what happened. I can't go back either tinker with my past life or tinker with my genes. I can't do that.
Sure.
But now I can handle it in such a way that the future is assured. Of course, given the limitations that all of us have a blueprint. Because we are born with a certain blueprint. some people cannot do artistic things, some people cannot do mathematics. So there are some limitations, I agree. But there is also this fact that the brain that we have is a very complex instrument and which can be trained to learn things which it doesn't know.
Very true.
So start by looking at now and see how we can change ourselves. If you can change ourselves, then according to the theory of karma, your future is assured.
And I think that's very true, but I think one thing that kids struggle with is the idea of present and now. I think we're a generation where, like I had said before, we like instant gratification. We
Right.
Google the answers. We follow this workout
Correct.
routine. We you tell us to do certain asanas in the morning. We will do it. We will figure out a way to get that into our routine. But the problem is that with life's problems, let's say you're working hard. You've finished all the exams for school. You've done everything. Then something happens. Something bad happens that you don't have control over. And I think that's what is really kids really struggle with.
Wait a minute. Now, instead of trying to explain it away with the theory of karma and so on, get them to face why the problem has come and try to sort it out there, not put it on some other theory.
Okay.
Then what happens is it becomes a very defeatist thing because I don't think I can do anything. Perhaps in my past life I've gone and peed in somebody's well and now this guy has come and poured dirty water into my toilet. So you can't do that. Can we look at it as things are now,
Right.
and see how we can remedy it. Don't try to find reasons. See, I'll tell you another story. This is from this life of the Buddha. Buddha says somebody went to a mango grove to eat mangoes, and while he was plucking the mangoes, somebody from outside or in the grove shot an arrow. The thing hit him. He's fallen down, he's in pain. Okay? He wants to get out of it, he's in pain. But the main thing in his mind is, who sent this arrow? I have to figure out where it came from. The Buddha said, by the time you figure out where it came from, man, you'll be dead. You'll be dead. You'll probably gangrene will set in and you will be dead. You won't ever find out who sent it. So what is the first step to do? Find out how to remove the arrow, how to get rid of this suffering which you're having at the moment, so that when you're free, and then you can think and try to find out where is the source of this arrow from. So what I'm trying to say is that instead of trying to blame anything that happens, like you said, I have finished my exam but suddenly some problem comes, I don't know why, I can't face it. Tell them that this is the way life is. You never know what problems come at what time. The ones who win are those who know who deal with it. Not those who speculate on it, but those who know how to deal it. Now let me tell you, even in sadhana, which is the spiritual practice, you are suddenly faced with odds which you cannot explain. If you go on seeking for an explanation, you will not be able to tackle it. So practical techniques are given how to tackle this, so that when you have reached a state where your mind is tranquil and calm, no matter what the circumstances are, then you figure out that you can find out the cause.
Okay. So it's more so...
Hands on.
Okay. So it's more so that we are learning ways to tackle our problems, but we can't assume that just because we follow this, the problems will go away.
No.
Because I think that's important
Very
for people
important
to understand.
Very important to know, because there may be another way of looking at it.
Yes.
You see, there may be, when you say out of the box thinking and when you talk about fuzzy logic and so on, it's not as if you say this can be the only solution. You need to look around.
Right.
Fortunately, we have a brain which has evolved over a million years and has learned how to look at things sometimes in a different way, but we don't allow it to do that.
Okay.
We impose our borderlines and say, think only within this border. You don't open it up. In this context, it's very important that the teachers, who not only spiritual teachers, even teachers in schools and colleges, especially schools, learn to infuse the spirit of inquiry in the students they have. I've seen this when we recruit teachers for the school, not only the school, for the boarding school. If they have a master in education or a bachelor, it takes 6 months to make them de-learn what they learned. You need the qualification, otherwise you can't employ them according to the rules of the secondary board. But those who have learned them are much more difficult for us to make them understand how to teach. Because they have these ideas they have come from with. So it takes 6 months to get them to forget it and start afresh. There is a beautiful small little book, I recommend that everybody reads it. It's by a man called Ivan Illich. It's called De-Learning.
What is it about?
It's about how we approach teaching somebody with a feeling that we know everything, this is the correct idea, and this is,
Okay.
you got to get that out.
Okay.
So that you also stimulate thought and make people think in different ways than from the usual box that is offered to us.
Okay.
And I think if you go back, since we are talking about ancient culture, if you go back into not so much the epics, but the Upanishads, for instance, you will find, especially among the principal Upanishads, which are 11 in number, perhaps they are the earliest. The thought process, they're trying to look at things in a completely different way than we would normally look. I'll give you an example. Talking about the supreme reality, which is all pervading, having said that, the Upanishad says about that, tad dure, tad vatantike, it's far and yet so near. Now in normal logical terms, something that is far cannot be near. It has to be either near or far. So what is it? Are they trying to confuse you that there's something which is far and yet so near? So you have food for thought, you see. You begin to wonder, what is this that? So it can't be a material object. A material object can be here or there. It can't be there and here at the same time. So perhaps they're not talking about something where you need to reach, but something which you would probably get when you stopped reaching anywhere. When I say reach, I mean grasping. So all I'm saying that there are even in tradition, there are wonderful methods given by which you can make people think originally, and I think original thought only can solve these problems.
Okay. So for somebody that is dealing with some sort of life challenge, they're struggling to figure out how to make some sort of change to deal with the here and now. Forget what I reaped in my past life. Forget all of that.
Exactly.
Let's focus on the now.
Good.
I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring, more problems or less problems, but for now, I have some control over my situation.
Yes, at least some.
So, last question before we move on to the next topic. Is there something to thinking positively versus thinking negatively? Because that's something we all have control of regardless of our race or religion. We can do. Is that a good first step forward for somebody watching this, or do you have some other maybe basic guidelines for somebody watching this saying, how do I make that first step? What can I do?
Okay. Of course, the positive thinking is very important. What I mean by positive thinking is to say that this is not the end. That's what I mean. This is not the end. Those who think this is the end may probably lie there. They won't move. They're stuck there. So maybe I should find out, explore new avenues to move so that I can get out of this, what is it called, this impasse that has taken place. So can I move out of it? So I think positive is, the very word positive thinking means that I have not given up. I have not accepted defeat. I want to move forward. Now, it not only involves thought, but it also involves action. Simply by sitting and positively thinking that I have lost this job because others were smarter than me, so if I think positively, tomorrow I might get the job, that's only partly so. I should look at the reasons why I failed and practically work out how to remedy them so that tomorrow I can succeed in an interview. But where positive thinking works is when you go for the interview, you're not saying, oh, I'm weak, I'm negative. No, that can change.
Okay. And what about somebody who's dealing with situation that is completely out of their hands? Like, for example, family has cancer. There's, no matter how much you positively think, there's something...
You can do nothing about that, let's be frank.
Right.
You can do nothing about it. You can only say that, see, there's one way of looking at this. I'm not the only person in whose only family this is happening. At this moment, there are millions of people suffering. I'm not the only thing. It's when I think I am the only thing, then the suffering becomes big for me. When I see that this is what is happening to hundreds of people around, I may not be aware, but every minute somebody is having cancer and there are millions of people on this earth. You see that, then your mind expands a bit. You know, then you're also worried about the other person's cancer. When you're worried about the other person's cancer, the pain of your cancer becomes less. Not your cancer, I mean in your family. So then the mind is, so we feel that if the mind actually grows and expands and becomes, begins to sense the all-pervasiveness of it, the ultimate reality, even to some extent, then you may not be able to cure the cancer, but you may be able to lead a tranquil life in spite of it. And you might be able to help somebody else who is going through the same thing. This is possible. See, it's not that a yogi or a great saint can will not have cancer. That's not true. As long as you have a physical, you have many explanations for that. But it's not true. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was a great saint. He died of throat cancer. Well, they have invented explanations like, he took other people's cancer. I think there's nothing wrong in saying that he had cancer because it's a physical body, it can have anything. But his having cancer is not like me, somebody else having cancer. He went through it in his own way, calmly, quietly, tranquilly. And during the time he had cancer was a time when he actually could test people and figure out who would stay and who would not. And those 12 main disciples were the ones who stayed on. Many of them had left saying, he has cancer, so he's, he can't be a yogi or a saint. Ramana Maharshi died of cancer. So this is not a criteria. That's what I'm trying to say. How you handle it, that is the criteria. There are some things you cannot stop. You cannot stop earthquakes. No yogi can stop earthquakes. You cannot stop, if there are so many so-called new age yogis in California, why can't they stop the forest fires? It's not possible. Let's look at this in a realistic manner. But if they are real yogis whose minds have grown and expanded, they should try ways and means of how to save people from this. So I hope you get what I'm trying to say.
Yes, definitely. I think it all kind of revolves around expanding your mind.
Exactly. And not just thinking about your small little. It's not easy.
Yourself.
It's not easy, I agree. If tomorrow my wife has cancer, I would of course be worried. I mean, but I would say that, there are other people also who have this problem. It's not only me. So why am I just stuck with one thing? Can I move a little up? That does a lot of things to us, to the mind.
Okay. And I want to move on to the next topic. But before the interview ends, I think to help somebody to get into that mindset, I would like to ask you at the end of the interview some books and recommendations you have to help people get on that track. So the next topic I wanted to talk about is kind of career ambitions and material ambitions that all young people face. And I think something that we really struggle with is that kind of a lot of the teachings it revolves around detaching yourself. How can you detach yourself when you need to? How can a young person reconcile their ambitions with the ideology of letting go of desire? Because it is important for us to, in some ways, achieve some sort of material success. I know you've mentioned, there's a story about a man who had a little goat, and someone told him to go to a shop, and then he can get more goats and more money, and then and like you said, we all can't just run away to the mountains. So how do we kind of reconcile these things that seemingly are very contradictory?
There's one thing in trying to lead a reasonably happy life, comfortable, external world. That's one thing. And there's the other, which is an exaggeration of it, a lopsided thinking of greed and always trying to be greedy about more and more. I have divided this into two. Both are not the same. When a young person wants to find a decent job or a decent girl and wants to lead a life normally, I don't want to call it desire. This is not a desire, it's a natural tendency to find safety, security and happiness, which is quite okay. May we be protected is the first sloka in the Sahana Bhavatu. So it's all right to be protected, but this is kind of unreasonable greed and trying to grab what others have for yourself. If we can put some kind of a break on that, then there is no harm. And for that you need to have, apart from your physical life's activities and your material activities and ambitions, you also need to realize that people have everything and they don't seem to be happy.
Yes.
So we should always keep one side of ourselves understanding this, so that tomorrow if something happens, you're not terrified. You know that you have a safe haven inside you, not outside you, which can't be shaken from outside. Lay treasures in your heart where thieves do not break in and steal. Bible. A wandering yogi in Jerusalem said that 1,000 years ago. So it applies to everybody. So therefore I'm saying, for youngsters, side by side with ways and means to improve their career, be secure and all that, there should be some kind of teaching which says, but don't be too greedy, because you cannot satisfy everything by just building houses. There is another aspect to this which will stand you in good stead even if your house collapses. This is what is permanent, not opposed to, with what is impermanent. So while you see this world, we all know that it is impermanent, though we wouldn't like to admit it, mainly because we don't know if there's anything permanent. So this is permanent enough. So therefore they have to be told that there were sages, there were people who have explored and found that there's also something else, and which is not far away. You think it's far, tad dure, tad vadantiki, but it is very close. Somebody said it is nearer to you than your own neck vein, jugular vein. So when you have something like that, say, wouldn't it be a good idea to spend little time on that also? So that while you go on and face dangers, you have a safe haven from where you can operate. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
No, I'm trying.
Yeah. So make sure that we carve out some time for that in tandem with all the other things.
Exactly. And now, it need not necessarily in the beginning be any meditation connected to the traditions. If it's there, it's okay. But if it is not there, go out into the woods, go off into the mountains, go to the sea coast, Go where people don't know you. The problem is when people know you. Get out and go to a place where nobody can recognize you. You sit and you enjoy the sunset. You watch the full moon or the crescent moon, doesn't matter. Or you look at the sea. You know why the heart expands? When I say heart, I'm not talking about the mind or the brain / brain. It expands because nature is not man-made. Nobody knows who made the mountains. Nobody knows who made the sea. It's there. It's nature. So therefore it's not man. Now these are all man-made things. So when you're with man-made things, you think like a man. Like a human being, sorry. If you're in places where there is less of man-made things or human-made things, then your mind is moving towards that which is original.
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say, some young people may say, oh, but we don't want to meditate. Why should we chant Om? Okay, take out some time every month, if possible, where you can go and stay quietly in some place. And when you go there, don't hypnotize yourself and drug yourself. Be free, open to see nature. So all these things have to be discussed with youngsters and they should understand this. If you say, oh, but you should also set apart some time to meditate, some people might be put away by this. But why should we exclude them?
Okay.
They're human beings. Just because they don't want to say, oh, they're human beings.
That's true. Yeah.
So my next book is going to be Yoga for the Godless.
Okay.
Because there are lots of people who are good people, but they don't believe in God. So what? After all, you believe in God, but you only believe, you don't know.
True.
How different are you from them? Not you, I mean.
True. Very true. I think that's...
And some of these questions I'm going to deal with in that book.
Okay.
Good, you sparked it.
Okay. I'll leave this with you then.
Yeah. I will even acknowledge if you like.
Okay. I think that's great advice for somebody who's trying to figure out a way to practically carve something out. And
look, expect disasters always. There's
Okay.
nothing wrong with that. But don't get this thing that everything is going to be smooth sailing. It's not. This is the way of the world. Something down, something up. So when you know that, then you know how to face it and get over it.
And would you say that when we are going through, like you said that we shouldn't detach ourselves from ambition because that's a part of our nature.
It's right. It's
But-
part of your nature. But the thought of trying to find the Supreme Being is also part of our ambition. It's not different from that. It may be on a different angle, but it's the same thing.
Right.
When the yogi leaves everything and goes to the mountain, he thinks he's giving up the trinkets and finding the treasure. That's what he thinks. It's not that he's giving up anything. So that is natural to expand. See, this is why I always nowadays say that this whole thing is about completeness. You were there in Guru Purnima?
Yes.
So I spoke about Purna, right? So this is inbuilt in us. You can't stop it. But you have to learn that after a certain limit, it can only be found inside. It can't be found outside. And all this life is about finding that completeness, Purna. Because we feel we are incomplete.
Okay. And would you say that in the search for finding completeness, also side by side with our ambitions, should we let go of the result? Like, I think some stress and anxiety comes from maybe not just being ambitious, but being so focused on the results.
Right.
And they may not meet your expectations.
Right.
Should we try to let go of that and concentrate more on
Effort.
effort and kind of let go of the results?
Yeah, see,
Just
it's
saying
not,
I did my
it's
best.
not, look, it's quite normal and natural and logical to expect a result when you're doing something. Agreed.
Yes, definitely.
But what happens is we give more importance and more time to thinking about the result than in doing what we should be doing. So if we can detach that and say, okay, let me put my attention fully into what I'm doing. the results take care of themselves. And if even after that, if the result doesn't come out, you can do nothing about it and you can't be blamed. Move forward and do something else. See, the idea is to teach the mind not to get caught up.
Not to get stuck.
Stuck. Move.
I think that's great advice.
Everything is moving. So why can't we allow the mind to move? Ishavashyamidam sarvam yatkincha jagatyam jagat. That jagat is all simply called jagat because it's always moving, constantly. And why would we isolate? The whole idea of photography, videos is all actually trying to do the impossible. Nothing stops but we try to freeze.
Yes, very true, very true.
So can we go with the flow? That's what I'm trying to
Go
say.
with the flow.
One defeat, okay, leave it, go to the next. Youngsters especially should know that many of the greatest generals and conquerors and scientists have had so many failures. Many of them would have had the same kind of failures, but these overtook them and came up.
Yes. So we should spend more time going with the flow.
Exactly.
Less
and
time
work.
worrying about others and focus on ours.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You don't have to say compete with anybody. You do what you do in as excellent a way as possible.
Yeah.
Don't worry what the other guy is doing.
Okay. Great. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is depression. So as I mentioned earlier, children and young adults in India, the US, and for that matter the world have we're facing the highest rates of depression and suicide today.
True.
I think some studies have quoted about 40% of the youth population that have experienced depression.
Yes.
So right now, in modern science, there's no cure. Currently, we're relying on seeing a psychologist, therapist, and drugs to reduce symptoms. Do you think introspection, yoga, meditation, possibly chanting can help with us deal with this epidemic? Is there something that our ancient teachings can help to, enlighten us a little bit more on this that maybe modern science has either not caught up with yet or we're not aware of yet?
I wouldn't completely dismiss the alternative of a psychiatrist.
Yeah,
Not
to
totally.
reduce that.
Yeah.
I think that's important to say.
Important because I know this. Some people who are severely depressed and who are undergoing treatment and who also may be having some kind of a psychosis or a schizophrenic disorder, they come saying that maybe if you learn Kriya Yoga you will be cured. I tell them, sorry, this is meant for people who are normal. This is not a cure. This is not a therapy. Because it is dangerous. Then such people, if they start doing, they become worse. Because already they are depressed and then they are cutting themselves out from the outside world and going within. It can create more problems than give a solution. So I wouldn't rule out that it is possible to get some help from a psychiatrist.
Yeah,
no question.
definitely.
However, what we have to look at is the root of the problem, the cause. And the cause seems to be that they are kind of rudderless. They don't know where to hang their worries on. There's nothing. They're supportless. These young people who suffer from depression, they think this world is all there is. And this is, you know how depression comes when you try to do something and you try many times and it doesn't succeed. Your desires are not fulfilled. Then you get into depression. You go steady with a girl for 5 years and one day you see that she is in the bar with another guy. You get depression. So somehow there is also through the ancient teachings of meditation and so on, more as a preventive than as a cure. While there are some limited curative effects which you can do, physically there are many, but for the mind, I would say if you start young and start the practice of meditation, basically watching the breath, calming the mind and so on, then it's possible that in the midst of all these shocks, you still survive without going into depression.
Okay.
This is important. But unfortunately, there is no such thing to hang on to. And one great danger is when somebody goes to somebody and says, I want to learn this, you have to become part of this or part of that. There are many people who don't want to become part of anything. They just want to be themselves.
Definitely.
So they have no way. Get it? So people who are young and who have pass through the young age and still not become old, they should take it upon themselves to teach young people how to handle this. That you need to do some kind of silent meditation, which doesn't mean you have to surrender to the guru or any such nonsense. I mean, you just need to do some kind of a technique, and the technique will work no matter you surrender to some A, B, C or anybody. If that technique doesn't work, then there's something wrong with the technique. It's nothing to do with the person.
Okay.
You get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
So if that can be introduced side by side with the ordinary education that we have,
side by side with seeing a therapist and maybe taking the medication.
That is only if you are affected. I'm saying also as a preventive.
Okay.
If you can have that, then you have a safe landing when something happens.
Okay.
You don't really totally disintegrate and fall down. You have something to hold. So that should be inculcated even in the beginning. You don't have to wait for depression.
Okay.
So as you do cycling, walking, trekking, exercises, yoga practices, physical, you also do some mind practices so that the mind also learns how to exercise, how to keep calm, how not to get too affected by ups and downs.
Okay.
So that if you need, there are many ancient sources to draw from.
Okay.
But you need to read them carefully, and you need somebody who has already gone through this to kind of explain it to you.
Okay. And maybe we could put together some sources, not during the video, but leave a link in the description box for someone who'd like to find those resources. Yes. And for somebody who is affected by depression.
For them, there are some exercises which might help, like listening to music.
Okay.
Or watching your breath. Keeping away from narcotics and alcohol and things like that. So in some way, if you can work this out, maybe the mind should be put into a rhythmic pattern. Because what has happened is the rhythm has been disturbed. So this is part. But one shouldn't overdo it. One shouldn't suddenly say, now you stop all medication with the psychiatrist and start. No, this can have dangerous consequences. So it should go slowly, and then when you find that you're steady, then you can probably, and if it's a good psychiatrist, he'll know how to get the dose down and down and down and finally stop. This is possible. No good psychiatrist will say you should always keep eating these medicines.
Definitely, yeah.
Nobody. I mean, if he's a good one. And then when you're settled, then you suddenly find that I don't need it. See? Now for that, you should develop some confidence, and they need someone who can give them confidence. Not make him dependent on you, but give some confidence, saying that, look, it's okay, it doesn't matter, we can still work on this. Mostly what happens is, they were faced with, when people say, oh, there is no use, this fellow now, it is gone. Somebody says, it's okay, man, or lady, or whatever, not to worry, it's okay, because even in spiritual life, we sometimes go through some kind of depression, many times, especially if you're very keen on that. So you know how to, and you go through it and you come out unscathed. So if somebody can tell them, look, I have been like you at some point, but I've come out of it. And also, we need to look more into the understanding of these states called depression, schizophrenia, etc. We don't look enough. We just use labels. Honestly, I don't think that there are more than 1% people in this world, even that is doubtful, who have not passed through some kind of depression. For some it has become so much that it has its outward symptoms. For some it is not so much. Because of various reasons, they learn how to cushion it. But everybody in some way goes through it at some point in life. One. Then about schizophrenia. The word schizo means split, and phrenia is brain. How many of us really are not split brained? I mean, tell me, in some way. One is thinking this, one part of the mind is like this, another part of the mind is like this. There is conflict. Only when it gets exaggerated that people are labeled. We all live in a mad world. But when it gets exaggerated, then people label them and say this guy needs attention.
Okay.
So if you can talk to these people like this way, saying you and I are not different men, come on, let's see how to get this off. Get this off. Can we hold hands and walk? Then there is a solution. In most cases, there may be some cases where it has come out due to some drugs or something, which is a completely chemical thing, and it only a psychiatrist or a pathologist would be able to work on this. But generally, I think in most cases, it's about 10 to 15% of this is there in most human beings, and it can be handled by just understanding the person and being with the person and kind of helping them to sort it out.
Okay.
Chanting helps, singing helps, good music helps, walks help, new places help sometimes. Because suppose I live in this house and I'm all the time depressed. If I come back into this house, the depression sets in. If I go change and go somewhere, it might go. But this has to be found out through experiment.
Right. And it has to be something, I'm guessing, that you love, like a chant that you love. You shouldn't do it.
Shouldn't be. You're right. A person who has been brought up in a Christian background all his life, you suddenly ask them to say Om Namah Shivaya, it makes no sense, right? So he can go and listen to the organ in the church, the music. Some of it is beautiful. And maybe sing Hail Mary. It might help him, it may not help us. So this has to be done. The person who guides this should be non-denominational as much as possible.
Okay.
And non-cultist. Because if it turns into a cult, it's another thing altogether.
Okay. So the next kind of topic I wanted to discuss is another major stress in a lot of young people's lives is sex, sexuality, finding a life partner. How does spirituality factor into having a life partner? Not that they should necessarily be spiritual, but how will this impact our decision of choosing someone or being with them?
This is difficult to answer because spirituality per se doesn't have any rules and regulations for this. There are no yama niyamas even in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali about partners. So I can't say about this, but I think it can be looked at this way that a married life, for instance, or a life where two people are in love and want to continue for a lifetime, it's decided by give and take, which means in the beginning of the relationship one should understand that you are not always right. I think spiritual maturity helps one to understand this. So therefore spiritual maturity is important. Because it makes you understand that you may not be always right. The other person may be right sometimes. At least you have to admit, give benefit of doubt. If I say I'm the right, nothing gets, then that marriage or that living together is a disaster. So that is one of the reasons why I tell people that if you are married or you have a partner or you have a love affair, you want to live with somebody, please don't go and ask an unmarried person how to do it, because the guy knows nothing about it. It's a completely different cup of tea. But then what happens? You go to the gurus who are generally not married, and we have this thing, oh, guru knows everything, he is omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, so he can't not give an answer, because if he gives an answer then he is not omni. He says, I don't know, then he becomes less omniscient. So they give wrong answers because they have never lived with a woman. They don't know what life is all about. Only people like me who have lived with women know how it works. Right? So, in fact, married life is wonderful because it's the best thing to clip your ego. If I go to a satsang and there are lots of people sitting and it's wonderful and so on, when I go home, If somebody is there to tell me all that is fine, but heat the coffee before you drink, you know where you stand. Right? So, what I am trying to say is, what was your question? I forgot. I think I thought of my wife. I forgot.
Kind of how spirituality factors into decision making and choosing. Just generally, I think people have a lot of stress of finding the right person, and or maybe I'm growing spiritually, but all the guys I'm meeting are not.
I got it. So now, don't think that all the guys in the world are spiritually oriented, okay? They may not be. But somebody you find who you think is spiritually oriented because he thinks on spiritual matters like you do, may not be ideal also. Because the other guy who doesn't believe in all this may be a good guy. How do you know? So keep it open.
Keep it open.
And don't put your beliefs onto somebody's head. Let them think for themselves. I personally think that a total atheist and a fully involved theist can live together as partners in married life as long as they don't step on each other's toes.
Okay.
I think so. It's possible.
Okay.
So, what I mean to say is, what is required is sympathy, openness of mind, understanding, and to start with, to understand that you may not be always right. May not be. Maybe you are, maybe you are not. And the other person also has to think this way. Then everything is sorted out.
Okay. So that's just, I think, great advice for people to keep in the back of their head while they're meeting people.
Seriously, yes. Otherwise, you say, look, I am a Vedantin. I met somebody. This guy doesn't believe in anything, but he seems to be a good fellow. I say, value that good fellow business more than his Vedanta or non-Vedanta.
I think that's great advice. Thank you. Next question. This question is from a younger man. I think it applies to young women as well. So hormones play and lust play a big role in our formative years. Do we need to overcome this, or should we be in the flow of it? Does it, does this restrict us, or is this the path to finding the ultimate truth? Do you have any, or is there a way we can balance this?
First of all, I don't like the word lust. Because the word lust gives a bad picture of your normal response to your hormonal uprisings. So this lust is not a good word to be used. I don't know who translated this into lust. It's been going on for long, I've seen this. I think it's normal when you're young to have hormonal, sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. Yeah, sometimes high, sometimes it's nothing wrong with that. But what you should understand is it usually doesn't stop there, it goes on to more complications. And it's all to do with imagination. So if you can kind of harness your imagination to more positive things most of the time, not that this is less positive, but more constructive things most of the time, then you have less time and involvement in this. But there is nothing wrong. Don't consider it as a sin.
Okay.
You understand? When you consider sin, many young people, because of their background and their traditions, they start, even among the Christians, or at least in India, we don't have that problem. In the Christian theology, all children born on this earth are born in sin. Because Adam and Eve committed the first sin. And what is the first sin? They had sex. So it's classified as sin. On the other hand, in another religion, it's a virtue to be always having sex with 15 to 16 wives, the other extreme. Right? So we have this wonderful thing in Indian system that sex is not looked down upon, but as a divine manifestation of the energies which have to be kept under a certain control so that they don't run riot. Especially if we go into the Tantra. People think that Tantra is orgies. No. What Tantra is trying to say that most people cannot give up something unless they enjoy it. If you simply say give up, they say, why should we give up? We don't know how it is. So they have this Kularnava Tantra says, Bhogo Yogayate, yoga through bhoga. it is misunderstood by people. What it actually means is that you enjoy, and then you see what it is, and then you get out. You don't get stuck there. It's not easy, but it's possible. And now, from the yogic point of view, the same energy which is used for constructive purposes as ojas, it is the same energy when it runs in a different direction that one has sex. Same energy. Ojas, when it appears as rajas, then it is sex, physical. When it is purified and become sublime, then it becomes ojas. Actually, it is rajas, tejas and ojas. So, per se, there is nothing wrong with the sexual instinct. It's that which keeps the world going. If there were no sex, there would be no more human beings.
True.
What I'm trying to say, don't label it as something dirty. Look at it as one of the manifestations of man's desire to expand. So, see, if most people cannot expand and find out, so how do they expand? The tendency to keep yourself infinite, which is built in the system, generally works by having kids. You may die, but that kid is surviving, so you're infinite. till that, what is that called? Many generations. Till that stops, you're infinite, because what you have done is you are dead, but you have put your genes into somebody and that is going on living. So that is the man's innate desire to expand. In a physical way it happens when you have children. I'm not saying whether you should have children, that's not the question here, I'm just saying. So this, I would say that the younger generation, since they are so exposed to sex and various things on TV, on internet, it's a foolish idea to tell them to cut everything off and stay detached. It won't work. So they should be made interested in other things so that they balance the two. And then they realize that what the energy that is, sexual energy is a very powerful energy. It can do anything. So if you can harness it to other uses, not only here, then it becomes a tremendous energy. So this has to be understood in some way.
And you mentioned something about ojas breath and kind of transferring energies. Is there, like, for example, if somebody's having sexual frustrations and they kind of maybe want to transcend that to maybe put it in other ways, but they're unable to, do you have any recommendations to maybe a asana or something, maybe a different way of thinking to kind of help to...
I think it starts with a different way of thinking.
Okay. And
then you may look at some practice. Okay. So let's look at this. I hope it's all right to discuss, but the very act of sex, for instance, it's a culmination of something. Before that, there's a lot of imagination. Otherwise it would be meaningless. Some people like only somebody like this and somebody like something like, and there is so much imagination, there's so much romantic thoughts, there's so many movie influences. There are many things behind this whole game that ultimately culminates in a physical sexual act. And it differs with different people. You should keep this in mind. Okay. Now, ultimately, when the actual act takes place, well, in some scriptures it has been described as a sacrifice. In the Tantra, in the Mahanirvana, it's considered to be a sacrifice where into the sacrificial altar of the female goes the sperm which is sacrificed by man. Nice imagery, of course. And then, when both meet, on the physical side, a child may be produced or may not be produced because there are rejections many times. But in the actual act, in the ultimate culmination of the act, when what is called that happens, what is it called? Huh?
Conception?
Orgasm. What's it called? When an actual orgasm happens, see, the whole thing of this imagination and romance and poetry, everything is finally to end there. Okay, so when this happens, for a second, both partners cannot even think. There's a state where there's nothing, everything. It's almost like the beginning of a sneeze. You want to sneeze, and yet it's wonderful that it's coming. I mean, you can't think. You know what I mean? For that, even a split second, everything is. So it's for that we seek. And for that, there are so many embellishments and so many imaginations depending on our tradition. So if this could be understood by young people, they would actually know the value of it and non-value of it, both. So it should start with that kind of thinking. Otherwise, what happens is the sexual becomes the only obsession and other things are not. If you can remove it from being the only obsession, so that you give something else for them to understand. It starts with the idea actually that what we are looking for is that state when you actually have no voluntary thinking for the time being. Therefore you enjoy bliss. But it comes back in a second. And that's what the whole practice of meditation and so on aims at that. So if they are made to understand this even theoretically, the idea that this is what it is ultimately, not just the imagination, but all the entire poems, poetry, romance, drama, everything has come from there. It culminates in that. You get this? So if this can be understood, then perhaps one can enjoy sex, but at the same time not get obsessed by it, exclusively obsessed by it. There are other things also. This has to go. The problem is, when there is suppression, the obsession has more chances of increasing.
Yes.
On the other hand, you can't say that if you completely indulge, you can be free of it. That's been tested and it's not true. So we have to strike a middle path between the two. These, I think, can happen only with a little bit of dialogue and discussion with the young, and they see this point.
Okay. I think that's a great first.
And once they begin to enjoy inside themselves a kind of feeling which need not necessarily be accompanied by the physical act of sex, then they are slowly free of it. Not by suppression.
But by something else that's kind of taking
Music, something that really you enjoy without the act.
Okay.
Which animals unfortunately cannot do. They can only do that. They cannot do anything else. We, having evolved, our frontal lobes having evolved so much, should be able to step out a bit from this.
Learn to strike a balance between this and other.
Yeah. And no suppression. If suppression is not the answer, but safety is important. Just because you are not wanting to suppress doesn't mean that you should allow yourself to be under all influences. Then that is dangerous in many ways. So this is to be studied in a mature manner. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. And my last question on this topic is talking about like homosexuality. Children who are gay or lesbian, bisexual, transsexual, they deal with stress, depression, they have higher rates of suicide. And a large part of that is because society doesn't accept them, and many religions do not accept them.
Not the Hindu religion. Many religions may be, but certainly not Hinduism. I mean, so in its open aspect.
Right, and I was just wondering, what do the ancient teachings and scriptures, the Vedanta, maybe the Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, what do they say about this? And do you have a message to maybe kids who are dealing with this?
You know what? I think this is built into the genes. Nobody can be blamed for that. They may look odd to us, people who don't have that genetic problem to us, but they are like that. Okay. Now, as far as the ancient Indian culture is concerned, Shiva himself is depicted. The Mahadev, the greatest of the devas, depicted very often as Ardhanarishwara, half man, half woman. So, and in now it is different, but in ancient India people had a respect for such people. Very often they are looked up as something different from others. Now, because they are not looked after, they have become beggars on the street. In India, I'm saying, not here. So, and if you go into the Puranas and so on, in many instances, many stories, once Arjuna became a eunuch in the Mahabharata for some time, and then he came back. So, it's not as if, personally I think they should also be accorded a certain respect, and there is nothing irreligious in giving them their place. In fact, it is very pro-religious to give them the place. And I am of the opinion that after some time you will have transgenders working, doing the work that men and women have done before and traditionally. They would also do that. I have nothing against them per se. In fact, I have found that some of them are very good people, very nice people. Why are you hating them? I don't understand. They may be not like you, they're different from you, but why do you hate them? For what? That is because of partly because of religion, partly because of, I think, discrimination, because you're not like them, they're different. Personally, I think young people who are leaning towards this, they should not be discouraged. It is natural. If you discourage them and try to put strictures on them, it will end up in depression and suicide. Why don't you let them live? And having said that, every human being has a female and a male element in them. We know this, it's biologically known that their males have female hormones and females have male hormones. There is testosterone in the woman, but slight. There is estrogen in man, but less. When they go up little bit unbalanced, then somebody is like a transgender. When it is more this and less that, then you have decided your sex. So it doesn't matter really. I personally have nothing against it. I think if young people want to do it, they should not be stopped, because that's their way of evolution.
And for somebody who is...
Ayyappa, okay.
Yes,
Now,
if you could tell some stories, I think maybe someone who's watching this who is...
You have read my novel, Shunya?
Yes.
I've given the story of Ayyappa, who everybody goes and... Now, Ayyappa was born, it's a very funny story, that when Mahavishnu became Mohiti, during the Samudra Manthan, Shiva fell in love. And she ran and he ran, and then they had a child, and that is Ayyappa. And we worship that Ayyappa. It's a transgender union, which doesn't work nowadays. In ancient time it has worked probably, I don't know, maybe it's a story. All I'm trying to illustrate is, why do we blame them?
And I think for those who are watching, who are maybe experiencing this, I think maybe they can turn to these Puranas and not feel like they're an outsider, that their story is also being told. I think that can give people a lot of strength. Yeah,
give to Shiv Purana. Go and look at Shiva as Ardhanarishwara. And it's very beautifully done in the sculptures. One side is male and the other is female.
Yeah.
In fact, creative people have a little bit of female instinct in them, even if they are men. You know, many women also have a little bit of male streak in them. They make good sportsmen, sports people. So,
yeah, and even like, as you say, we all have different births. If you believe in it, we could have been born a man or a woman before.
Absolutely. That means that something has to be worked out. So you're here. So what? Yeah. Why do you blame them?
Okay, great. Thanks. So moving on to the last topic, I want to just talk about, like, now focusing on practical applications of everything we've talked about. What can, the young people who are watching, what can we work on? Kind of after watching your lectures and talks at home, what can we start reading and doing to kind of help us along this journey?
Right.
Sorry.
No.
So in terms of, like, could you maybe talk about, like, the benefits, like, of going on this path? Maybe it's chanting, maybe it's going for nature walks, maybe it's doing meditation. Could you discuss the benefits we'll see at doing it at a younger age rather than putting it off?
Yeah, but for that you need to have the right incentive to do that. If somebody can't force somebody to do it, then it doesn't work.
Right.
But if the parents are doing it, and if they watch and see, So there might be something in it. And then if they say, can we do it? Open them up to it. Not force it down their throat, then it won't work. So, and if you ask me are there benefits, I can assure you that there are benefits, because I have been practicing many of the techniques from our textbooks, yogic as well as Vedantic. The Vedantic, or I won't say Vedantic because Vedanta is only one of the darshanas. India, in ancient philosophy, Indian philosophy, has 6 darshanas, of which the topmost, the first that appears is Sankhya. It's so important that Kapila is the founder of Sankhya, and so important that in the Gita, Vyasa makes Krishna say that among the Munis I am Kapila. And the first chapter of the Gita after the Arjuna's disturbance is Sankhya. Sankhya Yoga. So, Sankhya is an ancient philosophy which is not like Vedanta, not like Advaita, monistic but dualistic. And there is no creator God there. It's Purusha and Prakriti. So, there is Sankhya first, then comes Vaisheshika philosophy. Then there is Purva Mimamsa, then there is Vedanta, then there is Nyaya, and then there is Yoga. Actually, Yoga and the first one, Sankhya, are not very different in their metaphysics. Only in practice there is a little difference. So there are 6 darshanas. And the importance of understanding these darshanas, not so much the Purva Mimamsa, because they deal basically with rituals, how to perform them, which is kind of outmoded nowadays, not required. But the others, Nyaya Vaisheshika, no, the Vaisheshika philosophy again, like Sankhya, is totally atheistic. It doesn't, people don't know. It's to do with how world was created from atoms, and Kannada was the first man to figure out the atomic thing. He called it Anu, and so on. Then Nyaya is about Tarka Shastra and what is just and what is real and what is good and what is. Then you have Vedanta and Yoga. Vedanta is that which deals with the end aspect of yoga, which is the Upanishad. So the advantage of these is to give you the right mind setup, the mindset to practice. So both should be understood. Well, this is the theoretical understanding. The practices are meant to bring about a practical understanding and realization of what has been said. Which is why in the Gita, Gita is considered to be Srimad Upanishad. The Srimad Bhagavad Gita, so Upanishads, Brahma Vidyayam, the understanding of the Supreme Brahman. Yoga Shastra. Why would they say Yoga Shastra? Specifically because Yoga Shastra is the way to find out about this Brahma Vidya. So while you need the theoretical background and the metaphysical understanding, you also need the practice, which is yoga. So both have to go side by side. So I have gone through many practices, and I think one hand, I personally think they open your mind, and they keep it so open that no dogma can actually shut the windows or doors. Physically, it gives you good, perfect health, especially because you don't overindulge in anything day-to-day life, and because of your practices. You save a lot of energy, and this energy helps you to think. It also helps to keep your body in good condition, and you almost never feel the loss of energy. Almost never. Maybe for 6 days if you are not sleeping or something, maybe, but generally not. So these are advantages, and your voice becomes good, your memory becomes excellent, although we don't give much importance to memory, but it becomes excellent. And I don't know, there's something, I don't know if this is true, but practicing yogis have something beautiful inside them, which is usually manifested in some way outside. Skin is clear, the mind is clear. What do you mean? What more do you want?
Would you say also
And
that
you're so light. You actually become light. I have surprised Agi many times in the beach house, because when I walk from my bedroom to the kitchen, there is no sound, because I am very light. Suddenly I am standing behind her, so the TV, she goes like this. So it's not something special to me. I think anybody who practices the techniques of yoga, including pranayama and a little bit of meditation, develops many of these characteristics. And then also, which is very important, you take life lightly, you can crack a joke, you can enjoy. If somebody makes fun of you, you can always think of it in a funny way yourself.
so it's almost like you're becoming more happy, more carefree. Would you also say, I think this is something I've personally experienced, I think young people deal with a lot of troubles with making the right decision. Does it help you to...
I think so. I think it has helped me many times to take the right decision. Not now, also when I was young.
Okay.
When I was young. But then, having said that, first in your life you should decide what you want to do. And then try to follow that. But any time if you find that this is not what I thought this is the way, but this is not, you should be able to flip it and change and move forward. I have been like that, and I think it has worked for me. And I can't give any reason other than the fact that perhaps through the practice of, physically the practice of yoga, and mentally also the practice of inner yoga, has probably made the mind alert on this. Alertness is not the opposite of calmness. A calm mind is an alert mind. An agitated mind is not an alert mind.
Last few questions, and I know we have to wrap up. So for chanting, you have mentioned in your previous talks to chant the Guru Mantra and Gayatri.
Yes.
For meditation, for those who can't afford to come to one of your camps or come see you, but they follow you or watch you, is there some form of meditation or breathing that you can suggest now on this video that somebody can do to help them with many of the things that we were discussing earlier?
Absolutely. I'm going to give you something. It's not new, but I have not said this before. There are many things here, when from appropriate time they come out. This is one way of beautiful meditation which anybody can do. First, forget that Om is in any language. Consider it as pure sound. It's pure sound, like the wind blowing Om. So you start like this, that you start chanting Om. Oh, lengthen it. Lengthen Om. Fix your attention in the middle of the forehead. Knock a few times and just keep chanting Om. Now, your visualization should be that this Om is coming from here, and as you chant, it's coming out from here, turning like a circle and coming back here.
Okay. I'm gonna work on this one.
Yes.
Okay.
So you sit in comfortable posture and start with Om softly and say Oh, so you feel it's coming out because the breath is coming out anyway. Let it come out from here instead of from the nose. Think like that.
From deep within.
Deep inside. Okay. And then it's coming out and then coming back from where it started.
And what should we visualize while we're doing it?
Just a thread or a rosary moving.
Okay.
Oh. And one Om is top, another Om.
Okay. And what if some other thoughts come in our head while we're doing that?
If you keep doing this, there's very little chance of other thoughts peeping in.
Okay.
But if they come, go back to it.
Okay. So this is helping us to become more one-pointed.
It's helping you to become one-pointed, one. It's helping you to become calm, two. It is helping you to orient the movement of energy in your system in a certain pattern, three. And above all, it's something to keep you engaged in non-despondent thoughts.
Okay. So anytime you're feeling stressed, sad,
you can sit down
you
and
can
do it.
do this.
There is no specific time for it.
Okay.
You can do it at any time. And
Okay.
you do for 5-10 minutes and you'll see the difference.
Okay.
The proof is in the pudding, or the pudding is in the eating it. So if you're traveling in a train or you can't chant physically Om, just do your breath like. You close your eyes and do the breath and you hear the sound, consider that sound to be Om. You know what I mean?
If you take a deep
Yeah,
breath
deep
in.
breath and blow out. You can hear the sound. Consider that to be Om. And then see that the breath is coming back again.
And then when we breathe in, is it coming up here?
Yes.
And then out,
Out
it's going?
and going. Like I have not discussed this before. I'm just discussing it now because I thought it's an easy thing.
Yeah, you can do it before an exam.
Exactly. Before an exam, when you're despondent, when a near and dear one is lying dead and you don't know what to do, you can do it for many things.
Thank you for sharing. I think this will help a lot of people. And how do we know if we are on the right track? How do we know if we're progressing and doing this correctly? Because we can't, constantly be in touch. Are there signs?
See, one of the ways that you know that you are on the right track is that your mind slowly starts to remain balanced in the midst of all circumstances. And also, when you sit down to meditate, you feel very nice and you don't have much effort to sit. Most important is that you learn that the best way to live in this world is to keep your mind calm in the midst of opposite circumstances, pain or pleasure. Not that you shouldn't indulge in anything, but keep your mind don't get super excited when something nice happens and don't get too depressed when something. So if you are practicing regularly, then the mind automatically begins to reflect that.
Okay.
Now, the most important thing also is that then you grow out from your small little center and move outwards. It's a mother looking after a child is wonderful because there are many mothers who don't. So it's great. But when the mother looks after the child of a neighbor, then it's expanded more. The spiritual journey has started. So therefore, these are two things to note. Can we remain tranquil in the midst of circumstances, good or bad? If this is happening, you're moving. And also, are you becoming less selfish?
Okay.
Less self-centered, let's put it that way.
Okay.
And whether you're able to maintain your calmness. And if you can sit and in 1 second go into a deep meditative state, that is a very good sign. Physically, it may be reflected that your health is improving. You feel lighter.
Okay. And do you think maybe if somebody I think younger generation, they like to kind of keep track of things. Do you think maybe having a journal and kind of writing down how they feel about these, or maybe confiding in a friend or a family member,
idea. It's a very good
having
idea.
these things to kind of help to keep
Sure. It's
track?
a very good idea. In fact, if they keep a diary, they should circulate it among their own friends and circles and try to figure out how things are. I think that's a good thing to do.
Okay, great. And also, as you mentioned, to try to keep a regular practice, even though it's difficult.
Absolutely.
We have spontaneous plans.
If you have to play golf, you have to play regularly, otherwise it doesn't work.
Okay.
You can, but it's a waste of time. If you need to play badminton, you have to do practice. It's no different, it's more important. So why have we not practiced? So keep practicing.
Right.
Practicing makes it perfect.
Right. So we should try to carve out some time in our day, or at least
Absolutely.
to start out in the week.
Yeah. For that, you have to first realize that it is valuable and important to do it. That's important.
Okay, great. And to wrap up, how are there any books and resources for us to read and learn about? I know you've mentioned in other talks, reading the Ramayana, Mahabharata, also mentioned Patanjali's Karma Sutra, Search and Secret India, which I've recently read. I've loved. Do you have any recommendations for someone starting to go on this path, and alongside with listening to your talks, and something for them to read that can help to expand their mind?
Yeah, I think if you take the complete works of Swami Vivekananda and start from volume 1 and slowly, without hurrying, move on to the last volume, it's a good thing to do.
Okay.
Secondly, you can take a good translation of the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Some parts are complicated, especially the theoretical parts, but it's still worth looking at. And then do the Upanishads. There are simple translations of the Upanishads. I think the most non-sectarian, non-cultist translation of the Upanishad, even though there is a slight leaning towards the Advaita of Shankara. Vedanta is not only Shankara, there are many other teachers. So, is Dr. Radhakrishnan's.
Okay.
Because he had no agenda there. He was just a philosophy man, and he knew Sanskrit, and he had translated it plainly. So you can see the slight leaning towards Shankara in the commentary, but not in the translation. So that is a good thing to do. And please, there is this idea some people have that the Upanishads are very difficult to read. I disagree with that. It's not. Actually, they are very direct and simple. Some of the concepts may be a little difficult to understand, but actually they are not complicated, they are very straight. But even though you can say they were written or not written, they were told. Writing came much later. Told about maybe 1800 years, 2000 years ago. They have things which we still are thinking about today and have not been able to solve. So I think in this, especially for the young, it's a very important thing to read the Upanishads. Now I'm not trying to advertise, but I have 2 volumes of talks on the Upanishads which would be great to read. They're called Wisdom of the Rishis 1 and Wisdom of the Rishis 2. Because I've tried to simplify it as much as I can. So you could start with these and then carry on. Too much of reading is not so good.
Okay. Okay. And what about, do you have any suggestions for like 5 places in India or anywhere in the world, I guess, somebody who is a spiritual seeker, want to learn more about where these ancient scriptures are referring to these certain places, maybe a place that they are looking to find happiness, tranquility, understand more of their culture. I think that's something that many Indians who live abroad struggle with. There's disconnect between their religion, culture, spirituality. Do you have any suggestions of some places?
I don't have any suggestions on this matter, but I think it's good to experiment and find out for yourself.
Okay.
Go to a place, but I think if you have the scriptures and if you're reading them and so on, it's good to go somewhere where there is a practice of yoga, there is a practice of pranayama, but there is no, in inverted commas, cultism.
Right. Okay. What about like any places in nature, like the Himalayas?
That is great.
Or
I would always recommend.
Something.
I would always recommend the Himalayas because I love them.
Okay.
So you can go to the Himalayas,
okay.
and instead of falling into any trap, just live alone for some time in a quiet place.
Okay.
Make sure where you can get your food. If there is a close by ashram which teaches yogasanas, go and register there.
Okay.
Do your yoga, do your meditation, go for a walk on the Ganga, go further up and look at the ice-clad mountains. That can open up the mind. I personally have done this and I know it helps.
Okay.
Yeah. So you are free actually.
Sure. And I think young people love to travel. I think
absolutely. That they should travel. Traveling gives you something which you cannot get inside the house.
Yeah.
You move. There is a beautiful statement in the Rig Veda where Indra is advising his disciple, saying, move, O disciple, move, for he who moves, his fortune moves with him. He who sits, it stagnates and destroys itself.
Okay, great. And lastly, I think this has been like questions I've been getting from a lot of kids that I've talked to at Guru Purnima. Kind of in addition to bettering themselves, everybody wants to know how we can make the world a better place. How can we help others? Kind of what are your suggestions? Should we first work on ourselves? Should we do that while we're simultaneously helping others?
It's shining. First, you need to help yourself.
Okay.
Because if you don't help yourself, you won't know how to help others.
Yes.
So the change should start with us.
Okay.
And if not that you should go up to the ultimate till you are fully okay and all that, but somewhere if you see that you are beginning to change, that's the time to step out and make others change.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, if we are meditating, chanting, or doing things to benefit and
better
are
yourself.
basically, in a way, we are kind of spreading that to other people because
Absolutely.
we're helping ourselves
Yes,
and
yes,
we're
yes.
helping others.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Okay, great. I think that's it.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for
Thank
your
you.
time.
Thank you very much. That was good. You managed to make me think. Let's put it that way.
Thank you so much for your time.